So this lure, as nice as it looks, and as much as it looks like it might be store-bought, it's not. I made this, and I made it in the simplest, most basic way with the most basic materials and tools. And I'm going to show you how you can do it even if you've never made a lure before. This is a lure that looks good and catches fish. So if you're interested, stick around. Check it out, look at all this real estate I just put in a new big hanging plate. If you're new to the channel, my name's Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer, a lure builder, and an avid fisherman. And I make these videos to add just a little bit of physics and engineering to the art of lure making. And one of my real passions is to try to make this stuff as accessible as possible for everyone. Anyone who's just mildly handy, even kids. So this lure build is going to be a very simple one with very simple materials and techniques. But the beauty is that you get a lure that swims like a factory-made lure and really has the potential of catching some fish. So let's get started. So that's right, we're going to make this lure out of a brush. Now this is just a chip brush. It's a really inexpensive brush. You can typically buy it at Lowe's for under $2, like $1.50. And the best sizes are the 3-inch and the 2-inch. There's not going to be any engineering or math in this. I've done that all in advance. This is just going to be straightforward instruction on how to make this thing. So the first thing you do is when you go to the store to buy this, take a look at the little hole in the handle. And you're going to see that there's going to be a little bit of variation where that hole is. Most of them are going to either favor the right or the left side of the handle. And that's what you want. You want one that's slightly off center so that you can use that to your advantage. What I want to do is take advantage of this sort of recurve here to give it a little bit of a stylized look so it isn't just a blunt finish. And you notice that this hole is slightly below the center line, and I want that. And that's not going to be your eye. That actually is going to be where you put your weight. So if I draw a center line right from the center of the broad point of the brush all the way to the point of the handle, we can assume, hopefully, it stays on center all the way across. Then you can use that to set the angle of your bib. Now again, that's not going to be super critical. Somewhere around 45 degrees will work for you. We'll have the tie-on eye just below the center and screw it in. The belly eye will be just forward of the weight, and the tail hook eye will be right on that flat point that we're going to make at the very end. So that's basically your design. Let's start working on it. So I'm going to use one of these little draftsman's curves. Now you can use anything that has a big diameter on it, like a coffee can lid. And the idea is to just be able to come tangent with the existing curve. And then I'm just going to have a little bit of an under angle there. And there's our shape already. Cutting this out should be pretty simple. I'm going to do it on the bandsaw just to make it quick, but you can certainly use a coping saw or a jigsaw or any kind of little hand saw you have, and then clean it up with some sanding later. But before I get out there to do the cutting, I want to go ahead and draw in a center line so I can set the angle on my bib. And that's as simple as finding the center here and extending that to the point of the handle. Now you want to set your bib about 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter back from the point, and then draw a 45 from there. Now I have this little machinist square, but you can take a carpenter square and take a piece of paper with square edges, fold over a portion where you have a decent size here for a straight line, and you can lay it on here and draw your line in like that. It's pretty simple. Of course you can use anything else with a 45-degree angle. And the next trick is to draw a line straight across the bottom, and that's got it. Alright, so this is really the most critical part of this whole build, and that's getting that slot cut nice and square and in the direction you want it. And the more important part is the squareness. You want it to be square to the length of the lure. But what I like to do is set it in a vise. If you don't have a vise, you can always use a pair of locking pliers with something like 2 pieces of wood to protect the lure from the jaws. But don't try to hold this in your hand while you're cutting, because while you might cut your hand, the more important thing is you're gonna cut this. It's so unsquare that you'll never get this thing to swim right. And if you want to get really fancy and a little more secure, you can put either a C-clamp or some kind of clamp that has a nice flat edge here and will hold perpendicular to everything, and then you can just put your saw right there and just guide yourself along the flat edge of this clamp. And I'm going to take that cut right to the center line that I drew on this side. Alright, so now we've got a nice square cut and at the right angle. The next thing we need to do with this little slot is to widen it, because we're going to make a dive lip that's just a little thicker than this. Let me show you how I do it. I'm going to set it in here pretty much vertical like before, and I'm going to take this hacksaw blade that broke in half and I glued together, and I'm going to use that to widen this original cut. Now you can take whole ones, you don't have to break them and glue them together if you don't want to, and all you have to do is hold them, and by tilting it a little bit like this, you catch the line that's already been cut, and then you can slowly work it until you can go vertical, and then it's really easy to keep on line and keep it nice and true. Alright, so now we have the general shape. The only thing you have left to do to shape is take care of this hard edge that we created when we cut. Now, little pro tip, if you leave this area slightly flat just at the back, the lure will dive deeper. But we don't really care how deep it dives, at least I don't. This lure with the back rounded completely off will dive about 4 to 5 feet, and that's deep enough for me. You can take a razor knife or a pocket knife and slowly take the corners off and round off these edges. Or you can just work with sandpaper or a combination. It's up to you. It's easy enough to do. I'll get back to you when I got mine nice and rounded. Alright, so I've got it nicely rounded. Pretty happy with the shape. I'm going to continue to sand just to smooth it out really well. The next step is getting the weight in that little hole. So I'm going to use a little split shot.
And the amount of weight you want to put in it, it's going to depend on whether you use a 2-inch or a 3-inch brush to make your lure. But I'll give you a rule of thumb for the exact weight later on in the video. I used 2.5 grams in this lure, and that turned out to be just a little bit too light.
And to fill this in, you can use wood putty if you want to. You can use resin if you want to. You can use the old baking powder and crazy glue trick. So here's a little pro tip. You can start off with just a little bit of baking soda. Don't fill it all the way. Put a couple drops of crazy glue in there. Do the same thing on the other side. It sets up almost immediately. If you have UV resin, you can do this next step. Otherwise, you'll just have to bring it up to the surface with the baking soda and crazy glue and then sand it back. But let me show you what I like to do. So what you do is you take some UV resin, fill in what's left, put a little bit of extra, not much, and then take a clear piece of smooth plastic and press it right on top. Hold it really firmly and put it under the light. Give it a good 15 to 20 seconds to really set up. And now when you pull it off, and you end up with a pretty smooth surface with minimal sanding. I'll go ahead and do it on the other side. And there's the results. Pretty nice. Almost no sanding now. Let's drill the hole for the tie-on eye, the belly eye, and the tail eye. Alright, so before I drill the little holes for the hook eyes and all, I just want to show you some options for those hook eyes. You can buy ready-made ones from a Lure Parts website. You can use some heavy leader wire. This is 174 pounds. And you can twist your own. Or if you don't have either one of these, you can just use some small paper clips. And that's what I'm going to do just to show you that it's doable. Now these are the little paper clips. Don't use the big ones, they're a little too thick. So I'm just going to straighten this out just completely. And then using these Jeweler's pliers, I'm going to go ahead and just put an eye in it. And that's all I mean by an eye. It's just a nice round bend. Now, just as a note, everything I use here, I try to find a good Amazon link so you can buy it yourself. And I put those links in the description. If you just scroll way down, you'll see links for just about everything I use in my shop. Now, I've put an 1/8 inch drill bit here, but you can use an 1/8 inch thick nail. All right, now I'm going to take these locking pliers and use these to twist the paperclip wire around the 1/8 inch peg. You can pull a little bit and twist at the same time. And the idea is to get that helical shape and not a barrel twist. And there you go. I just need to do 2 more. Okay, I made all 3, but one went flying off on me and I can't find it. So I'm going to make another one, and I'm going to take this opportunity to show you how I normally make them. This is the number 12 wire. It's 174 pound leader wire, and these are safety wire twisting pliers. Again, you can find these things in the description if you want to buy a pair. And the pliers do all the work. And there you go. Now I just need to cut it down to size, about 1 inch long, and we got all 3. All right, to drill the holes for those wire twist eyes, I usually use like a 1/16 drill bit, but if you don't have one, you can use a little paneling nail or any kind of little tack or nail that's about 1/16 of an inch. And then you can just cut the head off and stick it with the point out in your drill chuck. Then it's just a matter of driving it in. And these will get glued in with crazy glue, but you can also use 2-part epoxy. Let's go ahead and finish the rest. Right, so what I'll do is I'll put a few drops right on these little threads, crazy glue obviously, and then I'll run in the drill backwards. I can drive it in as if it were real thread. And then I'll put a couple more drops right there on top, and I've done the same with the others. Well, right about this point, most people want to know how to seal the wood. And actually, that's up to you. You can get it as elaborate as you want. You can put some polyurethane on it. You can put some wood sealer. You can put some sanding sealer on there. You can do as simple a thing as coating it with some real thin crazy glue. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to spray it with some primer in a can, just to show you how simple it can be. And I'm just going to use this Rust-Oleum Ultra Cover. It's white primer. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to give it some time to dry. I'll give it a sanding, give it another coat, and probably sand it and coat it 3 times. All right, one of these days I'll learn to wear gloves and I won't go through so much Gojo. All right, so what I want to do now is to make a bib for it. Now I have a collection of different size bibs that I've bought, and it would be easy for just about anybody to get online and buy the bib they want. So typically people will make bibs out of Lexan, either really thin stuff or really thick stuff, depending on the size of the lure. Really often you'll have some of these laying around, and these are the partitions for these kind of storage boxes that I use for tackle boxes, and that's what I'm going to use to make my lip. So let's separate one of these things out. Just some regular masking tape and cover it so that I can draw on it. Now I'm going to draw a line through the middle of this thing. It could be just about anywhere. Doesn't matter how accurate it is, just as long as it's a straight line. Draw a circle right along that straight line. That's 5/8 diameter, so the radius is going to be 5/16, which is right at 7 millimeters. Try to draw it in dark enough so it'll show up. Now I want to draw parallel lines the thickness of the lure apart. So the lure is 3/8 of an inch thick. So I'm going to draw parallel lines 3/16 to either side of the first red line. And measuring 1/4 of an inch down from the bottom of the circle, I can square off this little tab. There you go. Now if you don't have a compass, you can outline a dime, a 10-cent piece here in the US. Now I'm just going to cut this out. Now you see I'm pretty close on the shape. I just need to kind of sand it back by hand until I get down to the lines on that piece of tape. Now it doesn't have to be perfect, but try to get it close so that there isn't already a problem with symmetry, because then you'll have an issue with trying to balance the lure. When I say balance, I mean tuning it to swim straight. Let me show you the lure that you saw swimming in the water in the introduction to this video. This came from this brush. And the first time I took this down to the dock to test throw it, I actually caught a fish, and I got some footage of it. But before I show you that footage, I just wanted to say, if you're enjoying these videos, give me a thumbs up. It really helps. And if you're getting something out of these videos, even if it's just entertainment, certainly subscribe. I try to put something out every Friday, and I try to make it entertaining and instructional. All right, let's go look at that footage. Alright, so the primer has dried, and as you can see, I've put a little bit of masking tape on here because my plan is to do the simplest paint job that I know is a proven color scheme and that you can do with nothing but a can of spray paint. Alright, I'm just going to use a red spray paint. This is from Ace Hardware. That's one coat. Let's let that dry and we'll give it a good second coat. So typically I'm going to use something really shiny and glossy and a good protective coating. But if you don't have two-part epoxy, you don't want to go out and buy a bunch to do one lure, this spray-on stuff will do the job in a pinch. It's a Rust-Oleum product, and it says that it'll bond to anything, basically plastic, metal, or wood, and it lays down a really glossy finish. Now the only thing is you have to put a lot of coats in, at least 3 coats, probably a couple more than that if you really want some good protection. Here's what it looks like over the red paint, and you can see on this side it doesn't have any on it, and then on the right side, of course, it's all fish-eyed up and everything. I didn't prep the paper plate or anything, but that said, I've only got so much time to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and do this one in UV resin just to save time. So there it is, classic redhead. I've taken the tape off our little dive bib that we made. I've scuffed up the end where it goes up into the body, and I'm just going to shove it in there. Now I've already wiped it down with alcohol, so don't forget to do that. And now to glue it in, you can just put a drop of crazy glue on either end at the 2 sides and let it soak in and let it set. But I'm going to use some UV resin because I've got it and it's quick. Well, you know, some people debate whether eyes are necessary at all, and I say they're absolutely necessary. I think that predatory fish key in on the eyeball. That's why some bait fish have false eyes, little dots near their tail. And that's to fool those predators into not really knowing which way they're going to dart. Do you need a lifelike, 3-dimensional, holographic eye? No. A black dot is really all you need. So you could easily paint a black dot on this, or you can go and buy yourself some little eyeball stickers, or the option that a lot of people kind of make fun of is googly eyes. And there's those little tiny eyes, they're hollow, and they've got a floating pupil in there that you can shake and move around. But I think they're excellent. They do make a rattle sound, there's a little bit of extra movement, and they actually add just a little bit of buoyancy to your lure. I don't have any right now. I used to have a bunch. I don't have any, so I'm just going to grab a sticker. I'm out of sticker eyes. Okay, so I'm just going to grab one of my regular eyes. I like trying to get them as evenly placed as possible. That's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and put a clear coat on it. So the other nice thing about doing it with a spray can is that you don't need a turner. But this will be done in like 45 minutes, and we'll be able to go straight down to the lake and see how it behaves in the water. All right, it's late in the day. I went ahead and pulled it out of the UV chamber, and I have to say it came out pretty nice. Pretty happy with the paint job. So let's go on out to the end of the dock. I'll show you how this thing actually performs. So let me show you what it looks like in the water, and then we'll talk a little bit about tuning the one you make. So you can see it floats pretty nicely neutral. It's not too head down or too head up. And you can see the swimming action on it. It's pretty nice. It has a pretty aggressive movement. Let me cast it straight out just a little ways. So you can see it's actually pulling a little bit to that side. It's right side, my left. That means I want to adjust the tie on eye in the opposite direction. So I'll use a pair of needle nose pliers and give it the slightest little tweak to the right over here, and it should be barely noticeable. But you can see it's retrieving pretty straight now. There is a little bit of a drift to it, either to the right or to the left. Lures with flat sides tend to have a little bit less stability. A lot of times that drift to the right, to the left actually attracts a bite. All in all, it's pretty stable. So when you're tuning yours, use a pair of needle nose pliers that have somewhat long noses. And the reason for that is when you clamp on to the front, you can then use the line on the needle nose to align with the length of the lure and see if there's something off. And then make just micro adjustments until you get the lure to come back to you nice and straight. There's a little more to it, but I'll get into that in maybe a master class sometime down the road a little bit. Now, because these flat-sided lures tend to be a little bit less stable than a round lure, you want to make it as heavy as you can make it without having it sink. Right now, this one's just a little too buoyant. Also wanted to show you the difference between this one and the one we just made, because this one is made from a 2-inch brush and this one's made from a 3-inch brush. And you can see 5 to 10% difference in size. So I'm gonna give you a rule of thumb for weighting these things, and it should be pretty easy to remember. On the 2-inch, put 2.2 grams of weight in the body, and on the 3-inch, put 3.3 grams in the body. That should get you good and heavy and still be light enough to float. Use that as a target weight and get as close as you can. All right, let's see how it does when I crank it, when I pull it along pretty fast. That's pretty doggone good. Whoa, the fish almost took it. All right, I'm gonna keep playing with this thing. I'll see you all next Friday.